Thanks for tuning into the Replatform podcast sponsored by Amplience and Klaviyo. You are listening to the volcanic talent of me, James Gedd, and my co-host, Paul Rogers. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you doing? You ready for Christmas?
Yeah, I'm wearing my bad taste Christmas jumper with flashing lights that the kids love. So all good. Yeah, it's our last episode of an epic 2022, isn't it? We made it into Spotify's top 10% most shared podcast globally for the first time. How do you feel?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, very excited.
Yeah, you almost sounded excited as well. So yeah, and that is in large part thanks to all of you wonderful people for listening. So we really appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed the content we brought to you in 2022. And if this is your first episode or you've joined an interesting one right at the end of the year, we hope you stay with us through 2023 as well. Subscribe to get episode alerts. And we'd love a like on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you are listening. Makes us feel much better about ourselves. So we've got a good topic for our last one of the year. We're doing an e-commerce vendor strategy and roadmap 2022 roundup. So we're going to cover things like, how has product strategy changed during 2022, top product features release, biggest customer account wins, and roadmap focus for next year. We can't cover every platform. There are just too many on the marketplace. So what we've tried to drill into is ones that have won quite a few accounts, ones that seem to be getting a lot of traction globally, have offer B2B, B2C, a bit of a blend, and also different types of platforms from some of the larger kind of heritage ones into more modern SaaS. So among others, we're covering Shopify, BigCommerce, Optimizely, Elastic Path, Commercetools, Oro, Shopware, Remarkable Commerce, Commerce Layer. But please know, we know it's not exhaustive. We did reach out to a few others, but unfortunately we didn't get their input in time to focus it. And it takes a long time to draw these lists together. So we had to draw the lines somewhere, but we hope you find it useful. So with that in mind, Paul, do you want to kick off and talk about Shopify first?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think Shopify had a pretty big year. They released a lot of new features. The most or a lot of the features came as a result of the Editions release, which I can't remember when it was, but the first half of the year, essentially they did an equivalent of Shopify Unite, where they just released lots of new features in different areas. And then there's been a few kind of smaller and some bigger ones as well in the second half of the year. So the first one that I'm, I guess probably the biggest one that I'm focusing on is the B2B release. So as part of that, they released customers and price lists and price lists into the core of the platform. And there's a few other features as well as part of that. So historically, you could feasibly, do wholesale and B2B via the wholesale channel, or, a separate Shopify store, or in a very scrappy way using Shopify scripts and a few other little kind of workarounds. But now it's actually natively within the platform, and I expect this to be a big area of focus for them next year. There's also been lots of improvements to Shopify Markets, which is kind of the foundation of their international offering, including better multi-language support, various new APIs, like the ability to build out different URLs, and the kind of foundation for doing market-specific content is now there. And I think next year, the hope is that they'll introduce payouts and local warehouses per market as well, which are the two kind of main ones that I still struggle with, but lots of big progress in that area. They've also released Markets Pro, which is the premium edition, which is based around globally. And there's lots of stuff around that where, they invested in globally and have built a pretty solid relationship there now. But essentially this allows brands to provide a higher percentage to Shopify, but they can kind of provide a managed service around some aspects of cross-border. So that's quite a big one. Improvements to their headless offering. So there was quite a lot of kind of newness around hydrogen, but then since then they bought Remix as well. So I think there are a few unknowns here, but definitely some focus from Shopify in the headless space. There's also been various improvements to 2.0, which was the rebuild of the Shopify kind of theming architecture. So they've released some features around things like search, filtering. There's also performance improvements, etc. But I'd say the native filtering was a big one for a lot of people. And then there's also been some improvements around that as well. So you can now use tags, not just meta fields, and a few other little bits. There's been various acquisitions. So the one that I've noted down here is Dovetail, but there's been some others as well, such as Remix, and there's a couple on the social side. as part of Editions, they introduced checkout extensions or apps, which is a massive one for a lot of people. So essentially, it just makes the checkout more extensible, and you can kind of build custom functionality within the checkout. And Shopify's kind of locked down checkout has always been one of the biggest barriers for like the more complex brands and retailers looking at Shopify. They've done lots of stuff around Web3 and kind of token gated commerce and, you know, NFT minting and stuff like that. And they've done some cool stuff as well. Like in their New York pop-up, I saw they did some pretty cool NFT based selling as well. Social commerce, so TikTok and Twitter are two of the latest direct integrations. And then they also bought, I forgot the name, but they also bought an equivalent of Linktree, where they can essentially send traffic from social networks like Instagram and then still own that traffic. And it's quite an interesting little space. So I've spoke to quite a few people that have been trying to monetize that traffic. So Shopify are obviously looking at a similar, or looking to go down a similar route. A few improvements to POS, and then the biggest one I've highlighted here was the introduction of iPhone tap to pay, which is pretty cool. So essentially you can take payment with an iPhone and then someone can just tap the phone. So that's pretty new, but looks really useful. Functions is another one, so which essentially allows you to start building out kind of back-end customizations. So again, that's something that a lot of people have been waiting for quite a long time. So that's another good one. And then there's lots of other things as well. So at Unite earlier, I think it was around September Unite, they started to show a new kind of way of managing content. So essentially a new CMS-like offering, which allowed for things like content models. And it looked like that would be quite tightly integrated with Hydrogen. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then they've also done things like their ERP integrations, or the first phase of that, and various other things. So I think it's been quite a big year for Shopify.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. I think that leads on nicely to the next one, which I'm going to talk about, BigCommerce, because you tend to do more Shopify projects. I tend to do a few more BigCommerce, but they've both had a pretty big years in terms of where they're going with the product strategy, but also, I guess, the coverage and the number of client wins. I think BigCommerce is an interesting one because they've definitely, their strategy is moving more upmarket. They want to be like seen as the modern e-commerce platform for enterprise. I think before it's safe to say they well established in smaller business and SMEs, but they've definitely moved into enterprise space with wins like Ted Baker, which we'll come on to in a bit. But they've also, I guess, the other bit that they've been focused on is tech improvements as well. So not just the customer facing features, but the underlying architecture and infrastructure for developers to make it more effective and more performant. So moving the APIs over to GraphQL. They've also been extending their ecosystem through stronger technology integrations, both in terms of buying and acquisition into the platform and strong partnerships. They've added, we talked about advanced commerce earlier, as a really good modern search and merchandising and Rex tool. That's now their search and merch partner of choice for next year. There's going to be closer embedding. The connector will get built out. They'll inevitably an API integration will follow. So they're really trying to build out that ecosystem. I guess that's an inevitable competitive necessity up against Shopify, which has got a really vibrant app and technology ecosystem. So that's strategically. In terms of features, the ones I'm going to pull out are multi-storefront, which enables people with B2C and B2B to manage multiple storefronts within the same instance. It reduces operational costs and complexity rather than having to log in to different storefronts every single time you want to manage them. I know that one of the limitations previously with MSF was it wasn't compatible with the native bundle B2B functionality, which BigCommerce acquired, I think it was last year, and brought into the core platform, which offers a really good mature B2B product suite. So you couldn't do MSF with it, but that is now coming. That's in the works. I'm not sure whether it's in beta or for release early next year. I believe the latter, but that's going to be a big change for MSF. Because currently, in order to do B2B properly, you'd have to go to the headless route because it wouldn't work. MSF wasn't working with the bundle B2B, so that would be a big benefit to merchants. They've also added MLI, multi-level inventory, which is in beta. It's not fully live, but I know that they will open people up to the beta program if needed. So that's managing product inventory across multiple locations, So you might have different locations you want to sell stock on the same storefront. You might have primary location, you might have backups, you might have stores, different warehouses, etc. The ability to control where stock can come from and which storefront it's eligible to. And the other product feature I'll pull out, which I think is a really nice one, and again, it's via acquisitions. They bought Feedonomics, and now that's core to the platform, which allows enterprise level data feeds and custom product data feeds out of BigCommerce. So if you get your product data model right in the first place into BigCommerce, it contains all of the core source product data you'd need that Feedonomics can then automatically generate your custom feeds, whether that's a shopping feed, marketplace, social. And I think that's a real benefit. I know that, it's obviously it's included in the license fee, so you will pay a license and to cover the cost of it. But if somebody doesn't have really good quality product data or custom data feeds ready, or they don't have a PIM that can do the custom product data setup for them, then this is quite a nice added value without them to go find an additional third party. In terms of biggest customer win, I referenced Ted Baker. I think it's a really good example. I went live early on in I think Q1 of this year. So UK based but global, like fashion brand. It's built on their multi-storefront and headless. So I guess it's a good example of the ability to execute a headless solution on BigCommerce. They've got 12 regional storefronts and there is localization. So they are able to localize in terms of language, content. I mean, multi-currency is a simple thing that other platforms do, but the ability to truly localize the customer experience, the content, and the journeys across those sites. So I think that also, I don't know how you saw it. I thought that changed a few people's perspectives of where BigCommerce sits in the marketplace, that a brand of that size and that premium pedigree would select, because historically they hadn't won so many clients in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a massive win for them, and getting it live as well is obviously the biggest thing. But yeah, it's like true global brand. So yeah, I think that's exactly what they needed, particularly over here.
Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of they're having chatted to them quite a bit over the last 6 months. Their roadmap focus 2023. They're going to extend multi-storefront functionality to be properly integrated into B2B solution. So that avoids people having to find alternative, potentially headless solutions with there are really good alternatives, like JMango is a B2B front end that works headlessly as well. But not everyone wants or needs that complexity. So having a native multi-storefront with B2B and B2C is very, very useful. And then expanding the multi-level inventory capabilities, so add in the buy online, pick up in store, BOPIS, etc., so that those are all effectively working in the back end. So I think that's going to be, having worked with a lot of businesses where this is where they're trying to go as in their strategy. I think that will excite people who might have previously thought BigCommerce isn't quite ready for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next one is Commercetools. So that's one of the ones that we didn't hear back from, but in fairness, I didn't give them loads of time and I only reached out to one person. But I think we can kind of summarize where they're at. So I think they've had a strong year in terms of new customer acquisition, not necessarily in terms of volume, but they've won, from what I've heard, some pretty big brands. They continue to get a lot of exposure in that kind of CTO-led, like large, complex business end of the market in both B2B and B2C. So I think, their reputation is definitely growing. And then they've got a few more sites live as well. The big one, so they acquired Fantastic. I think that was this year, the actual acquisition, which was kind of front end kind of CMS and kind of DXP, I believe. I've not used it personally. And then that has now formed part of the new growth edition of Commercetools, or Commercetools for Growth, which is essentially designed as a bit of an accelerator for smaller brands and businesses. I think historically, or even now, Commercetools is definitely associated with the enterprise market. And I think, there's a bit of a kind of conception out there that you need to be of a certain size and have, a certain size development team to work with Commercetools. And I think I've probably seen that personally. And this is essentially designed to give them a solution to bring down market and compete with the BigCommerces and the Shopifys as well. And then as far as I can see, the Commercetools for Growth edition is basically Fantastic and Commercetools kind of built together, and then Algolia as well for search. And I believe that the plan is to build in additional third parties, so they've got something to take out to market that's a bit broader. And then the last bullet point I put was just integration. So, there's been a lot of different third parties that have integrated with Commercetools this year, such as Klaviyo, various others. So I think that kind of ecosystem is getting built out. And I'd also say I've seen a lot more development agencies starting to onboard and start kind of talking to them as well. So I think that's the other one that I've listed.
Yeah, I think pulling out the third-party integrations is a key one, because a lot of people struggle to really understand what will the solution look like. It's sort of like compose your own e-commerce platform feels to a lot of businesses completely open-ended and unstructured. So knowing that there are integrations that work with their APIs and package business capabilities to well-known third parties that a lot of merchants use is definitely a bonus. Cool. What's next then?
So my next one is Centra. So Centra is a platform that I'm pretty fond of. So I first looked at them a few years ago, and at the time I think they were quite small, and then they've grown a lot since then. They're really big in the Nordics and Scandinavia. And they've got some really good brands on the platform. So a lot of people in the UK haven't heard of them, but they've got brands like Sandqvist, Stronger, Bjorn Borg. They have Norse Projects, Nudie Jeans, like various others. And it's an API first platform. They've got a really good core feature set. And I think it's interesting in that kind of headless space, because a lot of those truly API first platforms, have best in class APIs and, very strong propositions when it comes to your technical stakeholders, but they maybe don't have some of that kind of e-commerce functionality and some of the capabilities built out. They're not quite as mature on that side, and there's a lot more development work needed for those projects. So I think that's where Centra could sit in the market. They are starting to come into the UK, which is probably the biggest one to note here. So I've definitely seen them mentioned a bit more. And they're starting to kind of, come to more events and sponsor more events, all of that kind of stuff. In terms of improvements to the platform, so they've improved their PIM functionality, and there's a few additional API endpoints that have been built out. The biggest one is they've rebuilt the whole admin. So that was when I first looked at the platform. I think that was my first comment. I didn't say to them, but I said to our team, it essentially looked like Magento 1. And now they've rebuilt it. It's much more user-friendly. They've kind of restructured a lot of it as well, and really kind of thought about how things should work. And it sounds like that's been a massive project, and the end result is really good. So that one's good. They've got a really good wholesale product, which I think is one of the appeals for fashion brands. It's built entirely for fashion brands, and that's now self-serve as well, so you can sign up and kind of start your own wholesale store. So that's another good move. They've launched native subscription support and APIs around that, which is good. And then similarly with Commercetools, they've also built out more third-party kind of connectors or integrations. And Klaviyo is a big one that they mentioned. But yeah, I think Centra is a really interesting platform, and I think we'll see more of it over the next kind of 18 months.
Yeah, I really like it. I haven't followed it quite as closely this year, but I'm really impressed by some of their capabilities, especially around international. Seem to have a really good native feature set in there. Okay, cool. So that's Centra. I'm going to talk about Optimizely. So was Episerver acquired Optimizely. They rebranded as Optimizely. I think it might have been actually 2021 when this rebrand happened. So interesting platform because it plays in the enterprise space. It's got a strong heritage from its original content management and social and community, but grown out into like full e-commerce, and then adding lots of capabilities around data, experimentation, etc. So the only platform that's got a full enterprise experimentation capability within it's because of the acquisition of Optimizely. So they've had a couple of years of acquisitions, and their strategy is starting to emerge now where they're focused on product and platform services. So their definition is that they've got key products that fit into categories such as commerce, content management, experimentation, but then they have service capabilities that now sit across them. So customer data platform being an example. So previously they would build out a capability within the product, and now they're building out capabilities that can work across the different products, which I think is a really smart bit of architecture. Because obviously, customer data platform isn't unique to like commerce. There's data that sits in all of those different product strands, depending on which parts of the product suite you take from. So I think that's quite an interesting change in their strategic vision about the definition of the overall architecture. So they're seeing things having horizontal layers where there are things that are used in common across different parts of the product, and therefore opening up their overall product to enable faster delivery of like data to the different areas that require it. In terms of product features, and I've definitely been a bit more removed from this. This is what I'm really looking forward to. We're going to do a focus podcast with Optimizely in January around their whole experimentation tooling. But in terms of what they've been adding from a, I guess, commerce relevant area, so real-time segmentation. So they've always had quite strong ability to do segmentation within the platform. So you could set up rules to create custom segments where you could then do things like personalization of content or personalized rules or promotions to those segments. But now they've done real-time. So the targets, you can set up different targets that can adjust in real time and learn and move people seamlessly between segments depending on behavioral changes. And those automations are happening in seconds because of the AI and ML tooling. So previously, like dynamic segments would take a few hours to refresh and rerun and update. So I think that's quite a nice thing for people who are working on large scale, large volume sites where you might want to dynamically change what you're showing to customers far, far quicker. Then they also have added improve their commerce mobile SDK, so greater flexibility of tooling to allow people to build app experiences faster and lower total cost of ownership. So I guess this is more developer focused rather than the e-commerce team focus. In terms of customers, so they've won recently a big national pet food distributor, which I believe I'm not allowed to say their name, so I'm not going to, just in case I can't. But they supply a large selection of like high quality brands. It's a US customer. They've moved across because they had a custom solution that had poor performance, wasn't meeting their needs, and they wanted to get the commerce tool that had integrated PIM and also had the experimentation capability. And I think it doesn't suit all businesses. But having that all in one, the ability to execute experimentation across different areas of the e-commerce journey without having to go through the process of integrating and using a third-party tool appeals to certain businesses. So that was the biggest customer win for them this year. And in terms of 2023, from the brief conversation I had with their kind of head of development and product roadmap, they're going to be looking at continuing increasing the cohesion between the different products within the overall product suite, and improving things like the use of the customer data platform and platform-wide workflows so that you can execute workflows across the different areas from commerce to content management to experimentation to reduce manual effort and I guess improve like team efficiency. So as I said, we'll be coming back in January to pick up with them around that whole experimentation piece. I think that's a very interesting area to explore more in terms of what the real value add is to customers.
What is Amplience? In a word, it's freedom. The freedom to build a digital experience as limitless as your vision. Create, preview, schedule, and manage all your content in one easy place. Find out more at amplience.com. Amplience. Experience freedom.
Great. Yeah, I've never been hands-on with the platform, and I haven't spoke to them too much, but I've always been quite intrigued by them based on what you've said in the past. So my next one is a very brief one, but the next one is Elastic Path. So I'd say this is another platform that I haven't dealt with too much personally, and I haven't seen it as much in the UK market over the last few years, but I know they're still growing in the US. Similar in terms of positioning as Commercetools, I'd imagine those two compete a lot. Relatively simple response in terms of what we got back from them, but it sounds like the biggest change for them in terms of the kind of capabilities and offering was moving the kind of PIM merchandising catalog side into a single PXM, as they call it, offering. So they've kind of merged those together, which I can imagine would benefit end users. And then the big point that I've added here was that they've raised quite a lot of money. So this year they've raised $90 million to kind of push the core platform a lot more. So yeah, that was it for Elastic Path.
Cool. So I'm going to pick up on Shopware, and thanks to Justin Biddle, he heads up the UK strategy and business development. I know a few people listening will know him, so thanks for him for sitting down and just giving me an update on where they're headed. We just recently did podcasts with them actually on some of the key things that have been happening, and we'll be releasing that in January too. Strategically, so in reaction to the general economic and supply chain absolute carnage of the last 12 months, they have been focusing their platform on operational efficiency to help their clients. So things like improving admin workflows and capability, just trying to make life easier and simpler for people to self-serve. They added no-code flow builder to allow people to do things like customer segmentation and set up customer groups and then trigger workflows off the back of that with low to no code. Which obviously business teams want. They don't want to have to continuously rely on developers. And they've also changed their market positioning a bit. So they've redone the product definition. So they've got new packages of community, rise, evolve, and beyond to go through the different stages of e-commerce maturity, and obviously licensing to suit. And from a geographical point of view, due to the right investment round they recently had with Carlo and PayPal, they've increased their focus in the US. It doesn't mean they're not focused in the UK and Europe. Obviously, Europe and especially Germany, big heartland for them. But they're pushing for additional US momentum, and inevitably features and capabilities they release for US businesses are tightly relevant to the UK. In terms of features, I like the flow builder. So it builds on the underlying kind of core rule builders. So, the ability to say that, if X happens, then I want you to do Y, but ability to add event triggers and actions. So it enables businesses to create, I guess, richer use cases for automation. So, for example, a VIP workflow that might execute different campaigns differently to standard customer communication workflows. Do customer order management workflows. If you've got, which can work well in B2B. If you have different order workflows for different customer accounts, and even the ability to execute loyalty to different groups and offer different rewards to people. Then we've got customer specific price list, which is for the B2B, and I think this is a nice addition. So this is not where you can change your price list, having sale or from different price lists for a different country. It's about a custom price list for a specific customer, so B2B trade customer, so that price list can be unique to them. So you might have a customer group in where they have an additional discount to the standard customers in your trade portfolio. Therefore, you set up your custom price list for that. And other platforms do this, but they're obviously Shopware are adding out and increasing their B2B functionality, so that's a good addition. In terms of customer win, so interestingly, B2B is the main one. So they've been obviously focusing hard on servicing their B2B customers. So Zwilling, who've migrated all their B2B away from Salesforce, which I found interesting, towards Shopware. They're operating storefronts for like Netherlands, US, Canada, Brazil, China, Nordic. So quite a large project that, and it's always interesting to see when people move from other leading vendors. In terms of roadmap focus, as I said, they're focusing on B2B a lot. So we'll continue to roll out enhancements to the B2B capabilities. I think a lot of the platforms have been doing this over the last few years. Paul, you talked about Shopify, BigCommerce have done the same. Then they're also, I can't even speak today, enhancing subscriptions and adding an improved returns management infrastructure. I think the biggest one that they've been talking about for next year, it's not defined in terms of what time of next year, but is the what they call multi-source inventory, BigCommerce call multi-level inventory. So that ability to have different stock files, different stock inventory levels pushed into the same storefront, so you can sell from multiple locations, and to control which locations are eligible to which destinations, basically. So I think that's quite a cool and will be an interesting one for existing customers as well. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add to that, Paul.
I don't think so. I don't know as much about that platform, to be honest.
Fair enough. So the next one for me is Remarkable, and I like this because I think it gives us a slightly different view. It's a proprietary platform, but they tend to have customers who stay on for a long time. So I think that's always interesting because there's a lot of volatility in re-platforming in the marketplace in general. So shout out to Brad Holdsworth, who's the head of strategy, for sitting and having a conversation, talking about where they're headed for next year. So the primary vision for their platform is building out front-end functionality for their customers. So things like product configurators, subscription payment, etc., improving existing page types, so embedding of hero products into PLPs and new layouts for PDP designs. So they've been focusing a lot of that front end and I guess the merchandising trading capability. And they are slightly different in the sense that it's a proprietary platform. Each customer ultimately has its own product roadmap. They have their core, so they'll bring new features into the core that are eligible to every customer, but customers can then also build out and extend on their own. So they have a split between global assets and I guess what are local to individual clients. But what they're trying to do strategically is position themselves as like a highly customizable platform because of that extensibility. In terms of product features this year, interesting ones to pull out. So they've added asset management library to the CMS module, which is really useful because increasingly people want to have greater flexibility over managing visual assets, images, videos, the ability to import, export, the ability to classify, auto assign assets to products rather than having to manually do it, especially when you're working in larger catalogs. So that's now built in. So those who aren't at the point yet being able to justify a move to a specialist DAM like a Kantar or a Widen, well, this gives you good tooling out the box. Then in the merchandising module, they've got retailing subgroups onto PLP, and I think this is a cool addition. Gives them good, I guess it's a nice way of adding some core functionality that other platforms don't have without getting to a specialist third party. So you might have the ability to have multiple retailing zones on the same product list page. So you could have a new in category, all the t-shirts are listed, but you have a rule that's you sort them by like click-through rate. Then you've got the jeans, but you do that by stock availability or by brand. So that ability to cut out and apply different rules within the grid is quite nice. It doesn't go as far as an advanced specialist, like an advanced commerce, but actually it gives you more than a lot of platforms do natively out of the box. Then social proofing function, I think is quite cool as well. So the ability to add social proof messages into PLP, PDP. So I guess it's basically inserting content snippets. So they said they took inspiration from a third party like Tagstar, but built this into the back end admin so people self-set up. I think that's quite nice. In terms of customer win, Westbrook Cycles moved away from another proprietary, I think it was VisualSoft, to Remarkable. They had tried another platform before, but abandoned it after a few months, apparently, because it was too complex to handle their supplier data feed requirements and their APIs, which Remarkable were able to satisfy. And they said that, there's a lot of stats. There's a case study on their website if anyone wants to see why people moved away, how they did, what the impact was. But then I guess next year's focus is an interesting one. They are looking at improving personalization in the platform through like dynamic content based on referrer source. So, depending on where that person's come through, it could be from a marketing campaign, changing the product, changing the landing page dynamically, which is quite nice, and product recommendation solutions so that people can get that native rather than having to plug in a third party, do the integration or pay for the license fee. They're also building out loyalty solutions. So standard reward schemes, but also VIP schemes, and the ability to have tiered schemes based on different customer variables. And then the other area they said they're going to be focusing on is improving the automation capabilities around things like promotions. So the ability to automate the triggered launch or pausing of campaigns based on data. So some interesting stuff that's coming out for their clients. I think I'm quite impressed actually with how much they've got core in their platform.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of stuff in there that very few others have, or would rely on third parties. Interesting, they've got things like UGC and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, this is the joy of the ecom platform marketplace. And we always say it, no platform's perfect for everyone, and not everyone wants it. Some people like the idea of a core platform where they can just do best of breed, and others want the simplicity of, you've got the core. I don't need sophisticated functionality. I just need core functionality. You've got it. Simplifies my selection. Right, who's next for you, Paul?
Yeah, so my next one is Adobe. So we didn't hear back from Adobe. However, I put some basic notes together. So I think there's been a number of big wins for Adobe this year, but I think all of the big ones that I've heard about have been B2B. They definitely still compete in the B2C market, but I think they're winning some pretty high volume B2B markets and competing against the likes of Commercetools, SAP, Oro, etc. In terms of kind of newness within the platform, so the 2.4 updates are where the majority seems to have come from. There's been some minor feature updates around B2B. They have increased the GraphQL API coverage, and again, a big focus on B2B within that. Performance improvements, some kind of security patches, etc. They've also added improvements around the media gallery and how that's managed. I know a while back they also integrated with whatever the Adobe stock image solution is called. I can't remember what it was. And then they've also added in-store pickup. So a few kind of minor things with like via Magento. I think the one thing that I've added here that I find quite exciting around the platform is the Hoover kind of movement. So that's essentially a front-end framework developed by, I can't remember the agency that started it, but the community is very behind it. There's some really nice implementations. The kind of fundamentals behind it are a lot more modern, and there's some really performant sites on it. So that's something that's really nice to see within the Magento space. And then that's all that I put together really for them. I think the only other thing I would say is they are continuing to develop integrations with the other Adobe products. And I know that their kind of personalization and search solution, which is built on Adobe Sensei, is starting to get used a bit more and stuff like that. So not a huge amount overall, but I managed to dig out some bits.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen that the cloud enterprise costs have come down. They're definitely pushing that as more of an incentive to get people onto their overall infrastructure, rather than the traditional route of somebody building out a solution and setting up the hosting for the client.
It costs more now, I think, to go on premise. So I think for a while it was essentially that cloud would be free, but yeah, from what I understand, I think it would actually cost you more money to go on premise.
Yeah, interesting to see that. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it, to get everybody into their environment and ecosystem. Okay, so my next one's an interesting platform that I guess not everyone will know about. They're more they're known in B2B as one of the market leaders specifically, but they're not unique to B2B, and that's Oro. So again, thanks to Chris Raven, who's a UK director at Oro Inc., for providing some strategy updates for us. So their product vision is evolving based on how the B2B landscape is changing, or how they see it changing the demands from their clients. So they've seen much greater demand globally for marketplace propositions within B2B, and that is where their Oro marketplace plays. So that's a key strategic focus. And from the product point of view, they've been focused on, similarly, I guess, to where Shopware we're talking about, and Remarkable, the customer experience and performance and usability. So yeah, helping people to order faster, helping people to search, and also providing improvements to APIs and productivity in the back end from the development point of view to speed up the use of the platform. In terms of product features, so they launched their marketplace module. And marketplace commerce has been in fast growth over the last 3 to 5 years anyway. And you've got your marketplace specialists, but you've got people bolting in marketplace capabilities to platforms. But they built it ground up for B2B. And I think that's interesting because it's got built-in CRM. And often what a lot of B2B companies struggle with is, where's the CRM piece happening? What's commerce? What's CRM? What you're doing in your CRM versus your commerce? So having a marketplace within built-in CRM to give people the tools to serve different customers and do different workflows off the back of that, I think it's really, really interesting. So that's I think that gives great flexibility. They've enhanced their native search engine. And there's a couple of really cool things in this, which I like the idea of. So customers, so this is trade customers, can download search results if they want to, which I think is quite a nice. I mean, it's a simple option, but it's a nice one. They also have automatic alerts to customers. If you've got a saved search, and you think about B2B and lead times, and sometimes the decision cycle is quite lengthy. We're talking months, if sometimes it's even up to years. A saved search, if there is a change to something like pricing or an items that was out of stock has been restocked, it can auto alert the customers to a change from their saved search. I think that's a really smart feature. Then just core improvements to performance and productivity, so stuff that's less sexy for e-com teams, but will delight operation and tech teams. So revamped storefront assets like the JavaScript. They've optimized server response times to try and speed up the underlying performance, and added support for WebP images. So again, nothing like groundbreaking, but just important that they're keeping an eye on the overall productivity as well as the front end features. In terms of biggest customer win, I think Dunlop's an interesting one. It's a big brand. And their reason for going to, the quote from Dunlop was they leaned heavily on Oro's comprehensive native B2B features, which enable the rollout of high quality, mission appropriate back end and front end deployment with little need for customization. So nice win there. And in terms of the roadmap focus, they want to improve like multi-organization management for B2B2B and B2B2C. So different models suiting different businesses as you've got different ways of selling. So the B2B2B one's quite an interesting one, the ability for you to sell to like intermediaries who then sell on to other B2B customers. So multi-vendor commerce scenarios, which I know can be quite challenging, and a lot of B2B suites within e-commerce platforms don't do that. They support kind of quite simple parent-child account structures or customer groupings. Then try the other area they're looking at is improving the front-end user experience to improve what they're defining customer stickiness. So to trying to get trade customers to spend more time on site and to spend more time with products. So adding product kitting and product bundle capabilities. And then improve search controls, so reporting, so helping the marketing merchandising teams to self-serve more effectively. So the bundling and kitting will be an interesting one, because it will give customers, this is common in B2C but less than B2B, the ability to create a specific SKU for bundles, or to create effectively dynamic bundles, pulling in existing SKUs into a bundle and managing your pricing around that bundle. And this is really important when it comes down to order management, because not all systems are able to split out bundles into their constituent SKUs to get the right line item orders down into warehousing for pick and pack. So I think that's a logical addition. So that's my summary of Oro.
Great. Yeah, I think I've always found Oro really interesting, but I've just never seen many kind of deals in the UK that have been relevant to me. And to be fair, I do very little B2B anyway. But yeah, you always hear good things about it. And I know some of the big agencies around Magento have worked with it as well. So yeah, hopefully at some point we'll see more of that. So my next section is essentially notable others, and just a few kind of comments around some of the platforms that we didn't either hear back from or cover. So the first one is Commerce Layer, who came on the podcast a few months ago. I'd say the massive thing for them is winning Rafa. So Rafa are obviously a super progressive brand, do some really cool stuff digitally, and from a multi-channel perspective as well. And Commerce Layer will be the commerce engine now for, all of the transactions that are part of that. So that's a huge win. They've introduced a few more kind of native features within the admin, a few new APIs from what I hear. And I think they essentially want to, similarly to Centra, want to sit in between like Commercetools maybe and like a Shopify. And it's interesting what you were saying earlier around the level of functionality people want within a platform, because I think that's starting to come up whenever I talk to people about platforms, like a CTO or, anyone at like a high level that's semi-technical. That's starting to become like part of the conversation, like around that kind of line where you've got like a set of APIs here that is like a better approach than bespoke maybe, versus some of these all-in-ones or, platforms that have a huge amount of functionality without their kind of ecosystem. So I think we'll hear more of that next year. The other ones that we've got written down here, so Salior. So I think I haven't heard too much about them recently, but one massive thing that means we have to mention them is that they rolled Lush out globally. And this is that not only is it a really big website, very global brand, significant volume, but they've also got a native app, which is also powered by Salior. So I think that's really interesting. I know they've won a couple of others as well. We've got VTEX down here, but I haven't heard too much about them, to be honest, in the UK. But I know they continue to do well in Latin America, and they IPO'd this year, I believe, which is big for them. And then lastly, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. So the main things that I've heard coming out of Salesforce are around headless. So I think maybe late last year, they announced that they were going to start to kind of build out their API coverage and start to kind of embrace headless. And then that seems to have progressed a lot since then. And they're really starting to push it now. In addition to that, it feels like they're trying to address the high cost of ownership that's associated with them. So from where they have been involved in projects where we've looked at platforms, they've definitely been a lot more aggressive around pricing, trying to be more competitive. And then in addition to that, it feels like they're a bit more open around ecosystem. So whereas before, there was a significant barrier to entry to build a Salesforce cartridge, it feels like they're starting to see the benefits of that now a bit as well. And then I think that's it from my side. Anything else you want to add, James?
No, I think VTEX is an interesting one because I've worked with a couple of big consumer brands globally on training, and they work with VTEX, and they've worked with it primarily because of North America and Latin America. So L'Oreal is a good example. So they've got really good reputation and track record in those markets. But you're right, they aren't focused on the UK. So I'm going to be intrigued to see. I don't know enough about where their product strategy has gone this year, to be honest. But yeah, the Salesforce one I think is interesting. Salesforce and Amplience have partnered quite strongly to provide to showcase headless solutions on Salesforce. Because previously there was probably a little bit of reticence about how ready Salesforce was from a true headless point of view. How much was the logic really separated from the front and back end so that you can really customize your experience? But the implementations on Amplience, with Amplience providing the front end content orchestration and experience, I think that's a really good example of how they have definitely diversified and modernized to support those new models. And you're right about the license fees have become more flexible to provide a more realistic business case. It's still more costly to implement and maintain. I've not seen a cost model where it isn't, but actually the cost discrepancy has definitely come down in the last 24 months.
Yeah.
No, I think we've probably done. We said it's not exhaustive. We can't cover every platform. We here for about 6 hours and everyone will fall asleep and no one will be listening. So for those who have platforms they think should have been featured or have interesting stories to tell, or they're about to launch something that's going to be very exciting for e-commerce people, and e-commerce people want to know how it's relevant to them, reach out to us, tell us. We'd love to do a podcast on it in the new year. But for those of you who have listened, we hope it's been interesting. We hope there's been some nuggets that you can take away that are useful. We'd also love to hear what you think has been, what the key changes, what do you like or dislike about the platforms? Give us a shout. Let us know on LinkedIn or just message us privately. But thanks for listening. Keep your ears open for the first episode 2023. That'll be coming next week. Amazing. And please do subscribe if you haven't already. And we would love you to give us that like-in on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or Amazon. So have a wonderful Christmas and New Year, everybody. Speak to you in 2023. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host, Paul Rogers, via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.